This guy is about to get seriously beaten. Like, really fast. Applause. Welcome to Trump's America. Recently, at the Idaho State Capitol, during a vigil for Charlie Kirk, someone allegedly rode through the crowd on a scooter, shouting, "Fuck Charlie Kirk!" Right after, 5 or 6 men jumped on him and started beating him severely. Now, last I checked, we still have freedom of speech in this country. Or at least, that's what we were supposed to have. Hi, I'm Siri Crow, and you're watching the Midas Touch Network. Honestly, I'm not sure how things are supposed to calm down from here. This isn't just about the violent incident involving Charlie Kirk, though that clearly seems to be a breaking point. It's about the kind of America that Donald Trump and his ruthless allies have created. Stephen Miller is openly calling Democrats terrorists. Day after day, our fundamental rights and freedoms are under attack, and that's no accident. It's the direct result of this administration. We currently have a convicted criminal and a sex predator sitting in the White House, running a massive criminal enterprise. So while I know I shouldn't be surprised by Trump's hateful and violent rhetoric, I am. And you should be too. His statements from the Oval Office after Charlie Kirk's attack were so disturbing, I can't even bring myself to play them here. On the very day of Kirk's assault, I scoured social media. Almost every living former president condemned the violence and sent their condolences to Kirk's family. Democratic leaders and progressive influencers expressed their sympathies, prayers, and calls for peace. But on the right, it was the exact opposite. Post after post from MAGA supporters was filled with hatred. They blamed the left, called for all-out war against Democrats, even though there was no named suspect and no concrete clues about who committed this horrific act. People were declaring war on us without any evidence. Then there's Alex Jones, the same man who harassed Sandy Hook families by claiming their murdered children were crisis actors. The guy who spread conspiracy theories about real victims, he completely lost it. Steven Crowder even claimed to have exclusive ATF documents confirming the shooter was transgender, saying the rifle found on the roof had trans carvings, just like the Minneapolis shooter a few weeks earlier. They're framing this as some kind of targeted days of rage. It's frightening. These extremists are deeply disturbed, blaming everyone but themselves and planning to kill more. There's reportedly a suspect, someone who posted online beforehand that something would happen that day, and they identify as trans. But honestly, this is only the beginning. We're facing what feels like a zombie army of killers, totally brainwashed and desperate to act out their violent rage. For context, Alex Jones was found liable for defamation against Sandy Hook families and was ordered to pay over $1.4 billion. But he's been hiding assets and dragging out appeals to avoid paying. This is the kind of person calling for justice now. Truly disgusting. Look, I'm not saying there aren't dangerous people on the left. Sure there are. But when it comes to domestic terrorism and hate crimes, the statistics don't lie. The vast majority of these violent acts come from the right-wing extremist groups. According to the FBI, about 76% of extremist violence and murders in the U.S. are committed by right-wing extremists, while only around 4% come from left-wing extremists. Yes, I condemn that 4% as well, but as a nation, we have to be honest about where most of this violence originates. And while we're on the subject, let's talk guns. Many conservatives claim that the solution is simply to arm more people. But that's not going to solve anything. In fact, it will make the problem worse. Over 80% of these extremist attacks involve firearms, and more guns on the streets just fuel the violence. The right wing's reaction to Representative Moulton's recent comments was explosive. They responded like napalm had been dropped. They're furious, incapable of having a calm, reasoned discussion based on facts. So I honestly don't know where we go from here when one side refuses to listen to legitimate evidence and rejects any logical conversation. When a reporter asked Senator Elizabeth Warren what could be done to cool down the rising tensions, she didn't hold back. Her response? Oh, please. Why don't you start with the President of the United States? Every hateful meme he posts, every ugly word, it all comes from the top. She's right. The violence, the hatred, the lies, they start at the highest levels. We have a Speaker of the House who lies to the public every day, and a President who fans the flames of division with every tweet and public statement. That's the harsh reality of Trump's America. We have a president who constantly stokes violence. Donald Trump incites it again and again. But let's be clear. On the right, yes, there are radicals. Yet on the left, there are also extremists. People have been watching these violent videos and, disturbingly, some are cheering, even celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk. So the big question is, how do we fix this country? How do we come back together after all this hate and violence? I'm about to say something that might get me into trouble, but honestly, I don't care. The radicals on the right are often driven by fear. They don't want to see crime. They're worried about the border, and they say things like, "We don't want these people coming in. We don't want our shopping centers burned down. We don't want innocent people shot in the streets." Meanwhile, the radicals on the left are definitely a problem too. They can be vicious, hateful, and politically cunning. I could show you clip after clip of them saying, "Beat the hell out of him, rough him up." But really, if you want to understand the true nature of Donald Trump, just look at January 6th. That event alone shows exactly what kind of man he is. A dangerous, destructive force. Charlie Kirk had a huge influence on young, impressionable minds. And honestly, he still does, even though it's only been a few days since his death. What he preached was hatred and intolerance. Sure, he did it with a smile, but that didn't make it right. His views were radicalizing, and that was his goal. To radicalize America's youth, to turn them from being open-minded and liberal, which means free-thinking and willing to consider different perspectives, into narrow-minded, followers of a white Christian nationalist, patriarchy that rejects any diversity or dissent. It's deeply saddening that Charlie Kirk met such a violent end, but this kind of violence has become an epidemic in America. For years, gun violence has been the leading cause of death among school children in this country. And who knows? With the way this current administration is going, and with figures like RFK Jr. promoting dangerous misinformation, we could soon see childhood diseases like measles, mumps, and polio making a tragic comeback. But right now, gun violence remains the top threat to our kids. The right keeps talking about more security as if that's the answer. Charlie Kirk traveled with a full security team 24/7. They were right beside him when he was shot and killed. Yet that didn't protect him from a single rifle with a scope. We all saw it with our own eyes. Security didn't save him. Now, lawmakers from both parties are seriously debating whether to tighten security at public events. And they should, because this violence is spreading. Remember Melissa and Mark Hortman, the former Speaker of the Minnesota State Legislature, and her husband? They were brutally assassinated in their own home in the middle of the night. The one place you're supposed to feel safest. That same night, Minnesota Senator John Hoffman and his wife were shot in their home, in front of their daughter, by a MAGA loyalist disguised as a cop. This horror show, The Masked Man at Their Door, ended the Hortmans' lives and critically wounded the Hoffmans. While Charlie Kirk is receiving a hero's memorial, with Trump demanding flags be flown at half-staff nationwide, Trump has never said a word about the Hortmans and their beloved dog, Gilbert, who were also assassinated. President Biden attended their funerals, but Trump refused even to call the governor. Biden visited the Hoffmans in the hospital. Trump, not a single word, no visit, no phone call. He simply couldn't be bothered. It's disgusting. America has more guns than people. We're a sick country and getting sicker. The most ill among us refuse to admit they need help the most. we learned that the person who allegedly assassinated Charlie Kirk was a young white male raised in a conservative, gun-loving family in deeply conservative Utah. It wasn't a trans person or someone from the queer community, as some tried to claim. The fever pitch of hatred and violence has to break. But the question is how? I don't have the answers. What I do know is that we're past the point of just being in trouble. We're in a very dangerous place right now. I'm praying that somewhere on the right, someone has a moment of clarity and says, "Enough. We cannot keep going this way." But I can tell you this won't come from the Trump regime. All right, I'll see you back here soon. Thanks for watching. Remember to be fierce. And I'm wishing peace for everyone in this moment. If you want to stay connected, subscribe to our Substack at MidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Philipke, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and exclusive content only available there.